Every single time you book a flight, save a contact to your phone, or buy something online, you're interacting with a highly structured digital blueprint. And if you want to understand exactly how the digital world safely stores all that information without collapsing into total chaos, you have to learn how to build that foundation yourself. To put this into perspective, imagine managing a massive, sprawling hotel with absolutely no structured system to track which rooms are clean, what the current prices are, or who is actually staying there. It would be a disaster, right? You'd have double-booked rooms, lost reservations, and honestly, a lot of very angry guests. Well, in this explainer, we aren't just talking about abstract data. We're going to learn how to build the digital framework to solve this exact chaos from the ground up. By the end of this lecture, you'll understand exactly how to design a structured database from scratch using SQL commands. We'll cover the core concepts, the exact commands, and how to apply them to real-world problems. Here's our syllabus for today. First, we'll look at the database blueprint. Second, creating tables and types. Third, enforcing data rules. Fourth, connecting tables with keys. And finally, modifying and dropping tables. All right, Section 1, the database blueprint. Let's dive right in and lay the foundation of our digital building. Whenever we talk about databases, we're almost always talking about SQL, structured query language. But SQL is actually a toolkit divided into different compartments. Today, we're focusing exclusively on DDL, which stands for Data Definition Language. Think of DDL as the architect's blueprint. It's the specific set of SQL statements that we use to create the actual database and the structure of the tables inside it. Just like an architect has to draw out the walls and rooms of our hotel before anyone can check in, we use DDL to build the structural containers for our data. Now, it's absolutely crucial to draw a very clear line here because this is something students confuse all the time. On one side, we have DDL, Data Definition Language. This creates the structure. It builds the house. On the other side, we have DML, Data Manipulation Language. DML is what you use to insert, delete, or modify the actual data inside. It's putting the furniture inside the house. You obviously can't put furniture into a house that hasn't been built yet. So today, keep your hard hats on. We are strictly focused on DDL, building the structure. Let's move on to Section 2, creating tables and types. Time to actually start pouring the concrete for our tables. The really cool thing is, building a table is actually quite simple. Once you use the SQL command to create your database, your very next step is the create table command. And that command is literally just a simple 3-step recipe for every single column you want to make. Step 1, give the column a name, like first name or room number. Step 2, assign it a data type. And Step 3, add an optional column constraint. That's it. You just repeat this 1, 2, 3 recipe for every piece of information you need to store. But wait, let's pause for a second. What if you build a column for a phone number and a user accidentally types the word hello into it? If your database just accepts that, your whole system is compromised. You can't call the word hello. This incredibly common mistake is exactly why Step 2 of our recipe, data types, is absolutely critical. Data types strictly dictate the exact size and shape of the storage boxes for our data. If you tell SQL that a column is an int, which is short for integer, it'll only ever accept whole numbers. No text allowed whatsoever. Looking at our different groups here, for text, we use char for fixed-length strings or varchar for variable lengths. For numbers, we might use int, or if we're dealing with our hotel's room prices, we'd use the money data type. That actually tracks monetary values accurately to 1/10,000th of a unit. And for tracking when a guest checks in, we use datetime. By strictly defining these types, we stop bad data right at the front door. Okay, Section 3, enforcing data rules. Now that we understand the basic boxes, let's add the security guards to our building. Constraints. Even with data types, we still need a bit more control. And this brings us to Step 3 of our recipe, constraints. Constraints are strict, logical rules that enforce what we call entity integrity. Take the not null constraint, for example. In SQL, null basically means empty or unknown. If we create a column for a hotel room number, we absolutely must apply the not null constraint to it. This tells the database never, under any circumstances, accept a new row of data if the room number is missing. It is literally a security guard for your data quality. Two other incredibly powerful security guards are the unique and check constraints. The unique constraint does exactly what it sounds like. It completely prevents duplicate values. If you're assigning employee numbers to your hotel staff, applying a unique constraint guarantees that no two employees can ever accidentally be given the exact same ID. Meanwhile, the check constraint acts kind of like a bouncer with a VIP list. It restricts entries to highly specific values. For instance, you could write a check constraint on a room type column that says, check that the entry is only ever single, double, suite, or executive. If a user tries to enter penthouse, the database is simply going to reject it. Let's do a quick mental check here to make sure we're on the same page. We know not null blocks empty entries. But what happens if a busy booking agent is rushing and simply forgets to enter a value for a required field, like the city where a new hotel is located? Normally, the system would throw an error and halt the whole process. So how can we be smarter about this? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the default constraint. The default constraint acts as a built-in safety net. If the user doesn't supply a value, the database quietly and automatically slips a predefined value right into the field for them. For example, if 90% of our business is based in British Columbia, we could add a constraint setting the default city to Vancouver. Now, if the agent leaves the city blank, the database just assumes it's Vancouver, inserts it, and successfully saves the record. No errors, no crashing. Pretty neat, right? Moving on to Section 4, connecting tables with keys. Let's make this even more powerful by connecting our separate tables together and building the digital hallways of our hotel. Before we connect tables, we need a reliable way to identify every single record without relying on manual typing. Enter the identity constraint. This generates sequential unique numbers for a column entirely automatically. You just give it a starting seed and an increment. For instance, an identity of 1, 1 means start at the number 1, and every time a new row is added, increment the next one by 1. The database handles it entirely in the background. This is usually the perfect tool for generating our primary key, which is basically the master ID for a record. Let's see how this builds the absolute core of relational databases. Look at these two columns side by side. On the left, we have our hotel table, and its primary key is hotelno. That primary key uniquely identifies the entire building. Now on the right, we have a completely separate room table. To link a specific room to a specific hotel, we use a foreign key. We put a hotelno column inside the room table and declare it as a foreign key that perfectly links back to the primary key in the hotel table. Think of the primary key as the hotel's official street address and the foreign key as a sticky note placed inside every single room that says, hey, I belong to this specific address. This creates a strict relationship so a room can never, ever be assigned to a hotel that doesn't exist. Finally, Section 5, modifying and dropping tables. Because hey, even the best architects need to remodel sometimes. Let's look at how to change our structure after it's already built. The two commands you need to know here are alter table and drop table. Think of alter table as your renovation crew. It safely lets you add new columns, remove old ones, or add new constraints to an existing table. And fun fact, when you add a new constraint, the database actually goes back and validates all the existing data to make sure it complies. Now, wait, this next part is highly important. Drop table is your demolition crew. Executing a drop table command doesn't just empty the data. It completely obliterates the table's structure and everything inside it from the database forever. So use it with extreme caution. So think about this for a second. How do these relatively simple building blocks, just naming columns and setting a few rules, power the entire modern web? The reality is, whether you're booking an Airbnb, checking out on Amazon, or just saving a new contact in your phone, beneath all that shiny software is a rigorously structured database built with these exact same DDL commands. Let's quickly summarize the key building blocks you've mastered today. You've learned how the data definition language allows you to blueprint a database. You know how to create structures and strictly define their data types. You know how to enforce data integrity with not null, check, and default constraints. You know how to link tables using primary and foreign keys, and how to safely alter or permanently drop them. You have built the house, the foundation is poured, and the walls are up. But a hotel isn't very useful without any guests, is it? So I highly encourage you to join me in our next lecture, where we'll switch gears from DDL to DML, Data Manipulation Language, and finally start populating our pristine database with real-world